In between tweets of mass destruction, the president still has time to improve college athletics by helping the NCAA stabilize the chaos of the transfer portal and NIL.
Welcome back to First and Short, ladies and gentlemen, your first place to get short bits of college football news and analysis. Today is April 9th, Thursday, and assuming the IRS and the FBI doesn't come to get us, we are coming at you live with some information on, the president is trying to help out through executive orders, the NCAA, figure out NIL stuff, figure out transfer portal stuff. So appreciate that. And we want to talk about how the top high school quarterbacks and how they're trending currently. Talk about a few of them, what visits they're taking, what schools are interested in, that sort of thing. And then I actually, we had some questions for each other based on the previous two agenda items. Is it still worth the time and effort to still focus on high school recruiting, or is portal just the way to go? So we'll talk about all that stuff before we get started. Absolutely want you guys to watch the episode, but also subscribe, share the channel, share the episode with somebody that would find this information useful. And appreciate you guys sticking with us, and hoping to see where this channel goes as it grows. So Aaron, start us off. We got a president that loves to tweet about college football. How is he trying to help this time around?
Yeah, let's talk about this, Save College Sports executive order, right? So President Trump, he recently signed an executive order that effectively puts the federal government's thumb like on a scale of, governance for the NCAA. It's designed to stabilize the chaos of the transfer portal and NIL. The order, it essentially directs federal agencies to review the university's eligibility for, federal grants and contracts. And if they don't comply with the, standardized rules of the NCAA on transfers and eligibility. I think the ultimate goal here is to, have a direct attack on pay for play. Trump, he has publicly railed against, 17-year-old quarterbacks getting millions of dollars before throwing a pass. The order, it seeks to limit the unrestricted nature of the transfer portal and create a more, unified federal framework for NIL. Essentially this order actually supports the NCAA's, move toward the 5-year eligibility window, as it calls for, clear rules on eligibility limits and a structured transfer process.
Yeah. Ultimately, obviously with executive orders, you can only have the federal government do so much. And where a lot of the loopholes come in is that each state has its own rules. The NCAA is really like not a federal kind of organization. They have to abide by whatever the state laws are in each state where the schools are. So it can get real murky. Hopefully the executive order can push the right buttons in order to make some change, but we'll essentially see there. What the NCAA has done is they've created a new proposal based off of this executive order, and right now, it'll make a lot of changes. Essentially, it's going to move towards a 5-for-5 model, we'll call it. Historically, players have had 5 years to play 4 seasons, right? One of them being a red shirt if they choose to do it that way. The new proposal would essentially simplify this. You get 5 full years of eligibility starting at the age of 19 or high school graduation, whichever one comes first. And you have 5 years to play 5 years, whatever, right? So you don't get any more medical red shirts for season-ending injuries, and no more like, how many games did he play? Did he play this half? Did he not play that half? No more math like that. If you're healthy, you play. If you're hurt, that year still counts against your 5-year clock. So the only way to stop this clock, they do have some exceptions: military service, religious missions, or maternity or paternity leave. So why does this matter now? We saw that schools that really aimed for having super seniors dominate. Right? We saw Miami and Indiana's two of some of the oldest teams. Carson Beck, he was in the league 5+ years, whatever it was. Diego Pavia, he was at Vanderbilt. He had to like petition against the NCAA to like get more years because he was at JUCO beforehand. So Indiana, we all heard how much older they were compared to everybody else. So essentially, this rule is going to aim to stop 25-year-olds from playing against 18-year-olds who while giving every player an extra year of active play by default. And
Hmm.
so I think a benefit of this to me is that we won't have to hear as many like court cases like we did with Trinidad Chambliss or Diego Pavia. These guys trying to beg the NCAA to play more amateur football against basically children who just got their driver's license. So that'll be a huge benefit to me. So but we have, this is just a proposal. We have to see where this would go.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, Moving on, let's get into some recruiting news, right? So outside of the transfer portal, let's see, how high school is looking. We have updates on, several program changing quarterbacks that are coming out of high school and that they're trending for the upcoming recruiting class. First name that pops to my mind is the number one overall quarterback in the next upcoming class, Elijah Haven. Right now, it looks to be a massive battle between Georgia and Bama on this one. Alabama is the favorites to get this guy, but he's visiting Athens this Thursday and Tuscaloosa this Saturday. A sleeper team on this radar for this guy is Kentucky. He's going to visit them April 14th. He's a Haven. He's a dual threat monster. He's in high school throwing for over 3,000 yards and 62 touchdowns while also running 11 touchdowns on the ground. If he picks Alabama, he's going to join an offense that was very, very lethal in 2025. They averaged 42 points a game and 248 passing yards, heavily dependent on the quarterback. So I'm sure, Kalen DeBoer, if he's able to pick this guy up, he's going to want to build a team around him to balance that offense, but also let him shine and thrive.
Yeah, definitely seems like a quarterback that's built for like a Kalen DeBoer system. You
Yep.
mentioned Kentucky as a sleeper. We have to remember Kentucky is different now, right? They have Will Stein, the offensive coordinator from Oregon, who is the head
Hmm.
coach now, and so Kentucky is going to be a offensive minded, offense first team. And so we are going to consistently see names like Elijah Haven or other like high name or high ranked quarterbacks think about Kentucky at least.
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Makes sense. Next on my list, I have Will Menzel. He's the number fourth overall quarterback coming out of high school next year. He's an Arizona product. He's got over 3,800 passing yards and 33 touchdowns, and he's found the end zone 17 times running the ball. Um, right now on his radar, Oregon is the leader. He has a visit set for them on April 16th. Um, but Alex Golish and you know, South Florida are the long-standing relationship dark horse. Alec Golish, he's now at Auburn, so that relationship hopefully moved over to the new school with him. So there could be some pull there, depending on the offense we see at Auburn maybe this year, depending on how Byron Brown, how well he performs this year, right? If he's able to awaken this Auburn offense, maybe he could create some hype around being the next quarterback at Auburn. Those are my guys that I'm watching, that are in the top 5 in the next class.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Appreciate that. I'm that is good information. I was looking at a few other quarterbacks who's been like impressing scouts and impressing talent evaluators by doing well at camps and things of that nature. Peter Bork, he comes to mind. I believe that's how you say his name. He's currently the number 6 quarterback. Right now, Penn State is the heavy favorite here, and so that immediately, raised the flag for me. I'm very curious to see how the new head coach, the new regime at Penn State is able to start building, right? Obviously, we know that they brought a huge uh, transfer class with them. I want to see what that high school recruiting is going to start to look like. So he is going to be visiting, Happy Valley this Wednesday, and he's going to be joining a Penn State team that, in the past they focused heavily on efficiency. Matt Campbell, we're going to see. I'm sure efficiency is going to be something he focuses on, but what are going to be his points to focus on? We're gonna that's remained to be seen. But Bork's 15 rushing touchdowns in just 9 games. It kind of fits Matt Campbell's physical blue collar QB run game that we've seen out of Iowa State in the past. Davin Davidson, he's a number 12 quarterback. He's another guy that comes to mind. He is actually going to be committing this Thursday, and right now Florida is the heavy trend. So the same thing with like Matt Campbell. How is he, getting his new school acclimated to high school recruiting? This is going to be, this is a new era under John Summerall at Florida. So this is going to be like his first quarterback coming in out of high school. So while the Gators, they last year obviously struggled with their record, Summerall's Tulane team last year actually led their league in scoring with 37.2 points per game. So they were Florida, and John Summerall, they were able to retain a great piece of their Florida offense, Jaden Baugh. So this makes it a very attractive landing spot for a new kid like Davin Davidson here. Last guy I wanted to talk about, he's the number 16 ranked quarterback, Colton Nussmeier. If that name sounds familiar, he is the younger brother of Garrett Nussmeier. He had, look at this, another Kentucky mention when we're talking about top quarterbacks. So he had a great visit to Kentucky in the spring, and he still has his eye on Arkansas and Georgia, actually. So we're going to see where he decides to go there, but just wanted to bring up Nussmeier and the fact that Kentucky is vying for those top guys now.
Okay, nice, nice, nice. It'll be cool to see where the little brother goes, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, speaking of high school recruiting and the changing dynamic that we're seeing, right, with NIL and transfer portal and just trying to regulate it, right? With these changes coming in inevitably to all these activities around the NIL and transfer portal, plus the emphasis that we as the media put on recruiting. Like, do you ever ask yourself, Mash, um, you know, which positions are still worth recruiting versus just grabbing something that's ready out of the portal? What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's been the age-old question the last few years, right?
Mhm.
I think there's obviously going to be multiple sides to that coin, to that question. Nothing's
Mhm.
ever as black and white as it seems. I think the easiest thing to talk about first is like the financial side of it. You could almost you could break it down. Okay, so if we're thinking about high school versus portal, right? I think high school, we've always said on this show, a good program needs a good high school foundation.
Yeah.
And you could even look at that as a long-term investment. If we're gonna bring this down to money, this is gonna be your long-term stock This is gonna be the long-term stocks on your in your portfolio. So recruiting a high schooler, it really is expensive. You have to start when they're in 8th grade, maybe. So it's expensive in time and travel. You have to bring them out to your school. You have to fly their parents out. You're paying for multiple years of flights, dinners, uh, just meetings with their families. And then at the end, depending on where they land on, ESPN 300 or 24/7 Sports, their NIL price tag, it could be high, could be low. It depends on how much hype is behind them, but it's often going to be lower than your big transfer portal guys because they are unproven. Now, you do have the portal, and this is going to be your premium marketplace. This is going to be your maybe even like your get rich quick kind of things because you can find a gem in the portal. You can find a really high price player, and then they are your whole team. Like it's a premium marketplace. You don't always know what you're going to get, but
Hmm.
the portal is typically going to be more ready to play, ready to wear. You aren't necessarily going to be paying for potential. You're going to be paying for production that you've already seen at a certain level, and so that's kind of the financial reality of things. Like the multiple things that you have to consider from a financial perspective. I want to say like in the 2025 season, the season that just passed, um, wide receivers typically got the most money. They commanded NIL packages between 800,000 to 1.5 million for the year. Um, while like four-star high school wide receivers were like getting half of that. So um, that's just one position to kind of like focus on, but you're paying a definitely like a certainty premium in order to get players out of the portal. Let me ask you this, Aaron. If you're a GM and you're thinking about building a team, high school portal, not every position is the same. How would you distribute like your budget or your focus if you start from the top like a quarterback? If you start from there and work your way through the team, how would you like differentiate your efforts?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'll kind of, walk down my list, right? First things first, a quarterback. I feel like you kind of have to, put your hands in both pots. Um, you need to have that high school project, that you're going to be able to develop and grow around the team that's going to be the next guy up who understands the program. But you're also going to need him sitting behind, maybe if you're in a win now mindset, a portal, mercenary, somebody who's able to come in and step up and just execute like that, right? We'll have some examples of those later. But I'll
Okay.
move on to the next positions. So, at O line, D line, and DB, I feel like these all kind of are positions to where, unless you're just in a dire, I need to win now scenario, I think it's best to get those guys out of high school and develop them in your program. From an O line and D line perspective, you got to get to, the big men, and a lot of times they're rare in the portal. Um, you know, if they're good, the original school pays them the price they need, and after that, it's just a matter of developing them. Um, Wide receiver, you just mentioned it, heavy on the portal if you want to get those stars, right? These positions are plug and play, and receivers are in the business of wanting to make the NFL and get to the next level and make money, right? The only way you can do
Yeah.
that is if you get the ball. So stars looking to go somewhere to where they can fit into an offense and be the star. So if they're not getting the touches they want, more than likely they're prone to go somewhere else and get more money and get more touches. Um, and then lastly, for me, at the running back position, I think this is another position to where you can still lean on recruiting out of high school and developing those guys. Uh, you want them fresh. They haven't taken too many licks in high school, but also, running backs, they're, you know, the I hate to use this word because they're valuable, but they're the dime for per dozen scenario position, right? You always have two or three in your rotation that you want to fall back on just in case the injuries come or somebody's beat up, and you need to share the carrying load, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's pretty much how I feel.
Yeah. 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 That makes sense for sure.
Hmm.
Let's dive into like quarterbacks for a bit. So I was looking into this. So quarterbacks actually they move more than anyone else in the last 5 years, for example. 60% of top five quarterbacks transferred. So top five, coming out of high school, whether they stayed or left, 60% of them left.
Hmm.
Just going through a few names here over the last 5 years. 2021, Caleb Williams. He was the Heisman winner, number one quarterback, went from OU to USC. Drew Aller, to be honest, I don't think he was that great, but he stayed at Penn State. Cade Klubnik,
Hmm.
2022. don't feel like he's that great. He stayed at Clemson. Now you can pick and choose. Like obviously, I can pick and choose names to fit whatever narrative. But the fact is, we there's some other names here. Arch Manning, he stayed and he's doing really well at Texas. Dante Moore, he transferred from UCLA to Oregon and he's kind of found his groove and he's doing great there, right? So we can find names that fit one narrative over the other, but the fact is, if you're a top 5 quarterback, you either become the face of the program, or you leave before your junior year. It's just you're not gonna. We don't see the players staying that often. Arch Manning might be the only guy that like stayed. Some people call him the most patient man in CFB, for good reason because most players would have left that were in his position.
Yeah.
What about running? What about running backs? What do you typically see with running backs?
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, they have like the shortest college shelf life. You need this position coming out of high school, in my opinion. Because if you have the multi-year senior, super senior, you're starting to risk that injury or that wear and tear. Um, they, in my opinion, also have less leverage in the portal. To get a good deal as a running back since they're looked at as kind of expendable. I want to have 2 to 3 guys rotating. And, you know, at the end of the day, I need an athlete. And I feel like a lot of athletes end up playing that running back position.
I
Um,
a few names come to mind, like transfer wise, like Quinshon
mhm,
Judkins, probably the most uh, uh
yeah.
won the most, right? He went from Ole Miss to Ohio State, won a national championship. Justice Haynes, he's transferred. He's at his third school, kind of getting hurt
Hmm.
now. So maybe kind of fits your point. Kind of getting hurt now. Varying degrees of success, but I feel like most running backs kind of stay at their school, right? I feel like you had some names that you wanted to share.
Yeah, yeah. So, you look at Nick Singleton out of Penn State. He stayed. He was, the reliable guy through all of the drama, quarterback injuries at Penn State, 1,000-yard rusher multiple years. And then you got to think about, Jeremiah Love. He stayed and it worked out amazingly for him. He became a household name. Pretty sure he's going to be the number one running back taken this year in the draft. So worked out well for him. And then, you can't forget about people like, Bijan Robinson out of Texas. He stayed and, stayed healthy, thankfully. Got drafted by the Falcons and he's continuing to be that dominant guy, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and then what about receivers?
Yeah, so receivers, these guys move around a lot. These are the the transfer portals, best customers. They
Mhm.
get a lot of money and they move a lot, right? So, um, a lot of the names that I have listed here, they found massive success by figuring out what kind of player they are and then moving to very pass heavy schemes. Um, Travis Hunter, this one's kind of a unicorn because he followed his coach to another school and he was just a freak in his own right. But he dominated every year that he was in the league. But another name that comes to mind is Evan Stewart. He
Mhm.
moved from A&M to Oregon. He transferred to find that better scheme, right? He was under Will Stein, like we've talked about a few times earlier. There are going to be names that go against this trend. Obviously, we have Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams, some of the biggest names, um, two of the biggest names in the league. But even Jeremiah Smith, I saw an article today. He said that um, people were offering him $10 million to like get in the portal. Any player other than Jeremiah Smith would have got into the portal and took that money, right? So uh, that one's kind of like what's the word I'm looking for? Anomaly.
Almost like
That one's an
an
anomaly.
anomaly, right? Like
Yeah.
it's one in a million, one in a million type of player, one in a million chance opportunity, and again, a one in a million decision to just say, no, I trust my team. I know who I am.
Yeah.
Money's not the most important thing right now, right?
Yeah. Two
Yeah.
really good wide receivers from last year. One was at Alabama, one was at Tennessee. Jeremy Bernard started at Michigan State, followed Kalen DeBoer from Washington to Alabama. Chris Brazzell really came onto the scene at Tennessee. He started at Tulane, right? So wide receivers, they're going to be moving around a lot. They can start somewhere, find a scheme that they
Mhm.
like, they can get installed into a team by week 3, and all of a sudden the rest of the league, the rest of their competition, never even heard of this guy, now is like all of a sudden cooking their DBs and stuff. So wide
Mhm.
receivers, great for the portal.
Yeah.
What about the defense? I feel like defense tends to like stay, right?
Yeah, yeah. Defense tends to stay. I feel like if you prove yourself as a starter and become a star at your school, um, and you're happy with the money, there. I mean, it's less dependent on scheme at that point in time, right? If you ball out in the position you're at on defense, the NFL will come find you. You don't need to go to a you don't need to worry about being a pass heavy or run heavy team on the offensive side of the ball. It's all about balling out in your perspective position and area on defense. And then because of that, the schemes are, I wouldn't say they're easier to learn. It's just there's less um diversity in a scheme that you have to worry about because a cornerback is a cornerback at the end of the day. Some guys who have proven the success and stayed and really developed with their team through the years. Big one I think of is Ellis Robinson at Georgia. We saw him at first in his career kind of struggle, but then he developed, stuck with it, and Georgia's leaned and stuck with him to keep him out there on the field and developing. He's probably going to be the best corner returning next year, for UGA. Um, Another guy that comes to mind would have to be, Will Johnson at Michigan. And when he was there in 2022, he's a locked on corner and, he was a projected top 5 pick after a dominant 2025, right? Some guys who One guy in particular who, didn't stay, but the situation, kind of makes it an outlier and an anomaly is Caleb Downs, right? We saw him go from Alabama to Ohio State, but we saw that, after the big coaching change and Nick Saban retire, and he stuck with Ohio State through the rest of his career. So again, it still feeds into it doesn't really matter where you're at if you're able to ball out and be a baller on defense. People will notice you because you're making a difference like that.
I do want to talk about, earlier when we started this conversation, um, we talked about multiple sides of the coin, one being financial, and we talked about all that. The other side is the culture. And I would say this is like an invisible expense. Um, if you spend all your money on a portal star, the high school recruit who has been grinding in your program for 2 years, how are they going to feel? I feel like they're going to feel a little slighted, right?
Mhm.
Um, we saw several locker room revolts in the last few years where veteran players entered the portal because the school spent their NIL budget on a flashy newcomer instead of rewarding loyalty. And so that is the ultimate balance that you have to fight. If it was all just financial, then of course the schools with the most money would win every single year. But you have to think about this culture part of it too, like what's going on in the locker room, because it's not just that easy.
Yep, yep,
So,
yep. So I
Aaron, in
mean,
your opinion, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I was about to say, in my opinion, in it all, um, I mean, you have to kind of, recruit to set that foundation, and then in today's league and how dynamic it is, if you want to aim for that ceiling and win a national championship, they're going to have to dip in the portal. So you have to, balance yourself very, versely, right? If you don't recruit the high schoolers, I mean, you have no culture, you have no depth, right? You'll end up having to stretch yourself thin every year, just trying to hope you can spend money to bring the guys in that are supposedly stars and mesh them together somehow, right? Um, but if you don't, use the portal enough, you're bringing a knife to a gunfight, basically, right? And that's what we saw really last year with Clemson. Could not stay afloat and have that dominancy they usually have every year because they didn't dip into the portal well enough. Um, 2025, the most successful teams, like Ohio State and Texas, they signed, those small elite high school classes that had about 15 to 18 players, and they used the remaining 7 to 10 spots for, vets in the portal to immediately fill those holes or their gaps that they needed to improve on the next year to win now.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up like the roster like number makeup stuff. I was going back to look at like recruiting classes back from like 2018, 2019. Nobody's
Mm-hmm.
class was over like 26 people. Like everybody was in the mid 20 or somewhere around the mid 20s. Now, if we look at it, it's like the top classes are 30 like in the mid 30s now because people are leaving and you have to like fill those holes. So it's like not only is it you just have to suck in as much talent as possible from high school, see who pans out because people are going to be leaving. But I just thought it was interesting to see how big the recruiting classes have gotten, especially at the high school rank. Yep. So that's kind of our verdict, right? You recruit for the foundation, and then you use your portal to like find your ceiling, and so that's kind of the opus smart how does it go? Op- that's how teams are going to operate moving forward. And then we'll see where the executive orders and the new proposals by the NCAA take us into the near future. But thank you again for watching another episode of First and Short. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week. Cool. There's a couple parts I'll edit out. I didn't like that part, like how do they fare. After I said it, I was like, I don't know if this really makes sense, but
Yeah.
so I might cut that
Looks
part
like
out.
I don't know if it's still recording on your end. It says it is on mine.
I press stop. Oh, that's weird. It's grayed out. I can't. Oh fuck. What is this? Can you stop? Can you press anything?
Um, I can leave, but I don't think I can stop the recording. Settings.
Let me go to the website. Let me stop it.